A warrant of arrest has been issued for Russian President Vladimir Putin. The International Criminal Court says Putin has committed war crimes in Ukraine. In reply, the Kremlin says the warrant is meaningless since Russia is not even a signatory of the Rome Statute. The United States is also not a signatory but is welcoming the move, with President Joe Biden saying it's justified. For more on this, we're joined by Dr. Barend Prinsloo, who's the head of security studies at the University of the Northwest. A very good morning to you, Dr. Barend. And let's start with that issue around Russia not being a signatory to the International Criminal Court. What exactly does this mean, and how much weight does this warrant then carry?
Oh, good morning, Rofi. Well, that's the question of the hour, right? States who haven't signed the treaty are not obliged to conform to the arrest warrant at all. So we have 123 member states that have signed the Rome Statute in 2002, and 70 members of the United Nations, 193 in total there. 70 member states have not signed or ratified the Rome Statute. Among interesting, Ukraine itself, Russia, the US, China, and so forth. What makes this one interesting is that this is the first head of state from one of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council that have been indicted, or not indicted, but issued arrest warrant by the ICC. Now, Russia can ignore this, but the international view on this would obviously be that their own stature would be lowered. These are serious allegations, and it would be best to actually defend. Now, as you have said, Russia has stated that they don't deny the fact that people were actually deported, because the 2 people that have been listed on the arrest warrant, President Vladimir Putin himself and Maria Lvova-Belova, who is the Commissioner for Children's Rights in his office, have actually been cited for the war crime of unlawfully removing people from an area, specifically children. They are not denying that this happened, but they say that this was not a forced deportation. It was willingly done by the people at the time.
And that's a very interesting thing that to come about, because it's almost like a he said, she said situation when it comes to the circumstances under which these people were moved out of their particular areas. So with the limited powers that this warrant would have, would you say then that it's just a symbolic move to say that the actions that have been taken by Russia over the last year or so have been atrocious and are gross human rights violation? It's just a global acknowledgement of what Russia has done. Is it just a symbolic move then?
No, I don't think it's a symbolic move. The chief prosecutor went to the Ukraine and investigated this allegation that started around about 24 February 2022. And if you look at the ICC's mandate, they look primarily at 4 core crimes. The one is genocide, the one is crimes against humanity, the other one is crimes of aggression, and the last one is war crimes. Now, the crimes of aggression would have been more fitting if you wanted to target Russia and Putin as sitting head of state. That would have been symbolic. It's probably easier actually to prove and have prima facie evidence for it. But this one is for war crimes. So it's not symbolic. It's probably some of the best evidence that the prosecutor could find while he was visiting the Ukraine, investigating there at the scene. Now, these type of crimes are notoriously difficult to prosecute. If you think about the sitting head of state, Russia, which is the superpower, how will they allow anybody, any delegation to come and investigate and even provide evidence to them, or allow them even an area so that they can actually investigate it? So to get the type of evidence is very difficult. And you see that in the historical record of the International Criminal Court, 31 cases were brought before them since their inception in 2002, and of which have had 10 convictions and only 4 acquittals. And none of these convictions were for a sitting head of state.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. So I suppose that begs the question, Doc, will Putin ever face a war crimes trial at this stage, just based on the analysis that you've just provided?
At this stage, immediately, he cannot be tried in absentia. So if a trial is to start, you will have to actually be arrested and go there. So that's not going to happen. There is a scenario in life where there's, let's say, a regime change in Russia itself. There's pressure on Russia, and then maybe such a trial can begin. That is actually quite unlikely, in my view.
Why would that be unlikely? Because we did see it in the case of Liberia, with the former president there facing charges at the ICC and being convicted to about 50 years, if I'm not mistaken, Doc. And so you're saying it's unlikely in the case of Vladimir Putin if he steps down or if there's a regime change. But based on that historic knowledge, is there not a chance that some weight could be rallied around that kind of action as well?
Yeah, Charles Taylor is an interesting case in point. He was removed and given exile in Nigeria. President Thabo Mbeki was one of the key people that negotiated that he actually leave power. And then he was subsequently arrested nonetheless and went to The Hague for a trial. The dynamics around that particular case is vastly different. First of all, it's the political clout that the Russian Federation has versus Liberia. There's no not to insult anybody, but it's much different. So there was a lot of international pressure to get Charles Taylor in trial. And also it was the start of the views in the world that, after the Rwanda genocide, that we have to have this type of accountability for criminal actions that were committed by very powerful people. So it was a different time and a different perspective.
And then just a final thought from you, Doc. In the immediate term, with the warrant being issued after those investigations that you described, what kind of sanctions will then be imposed on the president or on Russia? We do understand that he'll be limited in terms of the countries that he can visit or have state visits with. But what are some of the other immediate sanctions or implications of such a warrant being issued? Yeah,
so there are some implications. The first being that any member state that are signatory to the Rome Statute, if President Putin were to visit them, President Putin must be arrested and delivered to the tribunal, or the criminal court, rather. So it might limit the places he can actually visit. We saw, however, with al-Bashir, the Sudanese president, who came even to South Africa, that this is quite difficult to enforce. And even when Russia went to Kenya and South Africa, it was only after the fact that a court decision that he should be arrested, and by then he has left in the first place. In terms of sanctions, you have to ask yourself, who can place sanctions on Russia? And we know that any or state can place sanctions, but it's unilateral sanctions. If we talk about multilateral sanctions, it will not go through the United Nations. The Security Council cannot put sanctions on Russia because they will just simply veto the resolution because they're one of the permanent 5 members.
Yeah, these are very, very interesting times and developments, Doc. Thank you very much for breaking down this current situation for us this morning. That is Dr. Barend Prinsloo, who's the head of security studies at the University of the Northwest, really unpacking what this warrant of arrest for Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, means and if it can stop the country from the current developments that are happening in Ukraine.